Apologies.
Don't worry. Are you good to go? Good evening and welcome to the first major applications planning committee of 2019. A happy New Year to you all. I'm Councillor Eddie Lavery, the committee chairman. I'm going to do the usual administration before we deal with the two items, both of which do not have petitions tonight. In addition to a relatively small audience who I must suspect probably have got development interest in the two. Obviously, there may be others who decide not to brave the weather and watch us on YouTube because it's warmer, drier and easier. Who can blame them? Apologies for absence first, please.
We've received apologies from Councillor Duncan and from Councillor Yarrow, Chairman.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? Can I agree the minutes of the meeting 4th December? Yep. Thank you very much. The agenda we are taking is all in part one and in public, and it will be the agenda as published by the head of planning. As I already commented, there are no petition items tonight, so therefore no public rights to address this meeting. The voting councillors tonight who will make the decisions, it's only if they somehow manage to get it to a tie, but I think we can avoid that, I get a vote. On my left we have Councillor Morse and Councillor Osborne, and on my right going down the table I have Councillor Edwards, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Rydiat and Councillor Tuckwell. The officer team tonight, Kerry Munro is our legal officer tonight. I think the first time she's done major applications, so welcome. Liz Penny is our clerk from Democratic Services and has got some wonderful orangey looking forms down there that you might like to complete and tell us how you found it. James Roger, the head of planning, Mandeep Malhotra, who is major applications team leader and our presenter tonight, and Richard Marchelski, who is our highways officer tonight. That is everybody. Can I please remind everyone that mobile phones should be switched off or at least to silent. There are very few people in the audience, but if we do need to leave in the event of an emergency, fire exit is that way and straight through the next doors and down the stairs is the ideal way out, but there is another one immediately behind me here. And we're not expecting any fire drills, so therefore if one goes, we will be leaving. But I'm sure the officer team will be out as quick as anybody else. Right, can I please start with item 6, page 7, Legion House, Uxbridge Road, Hayes.
Thank you, Chair. Agenda item number 6 is Legion House. There is an addendum on this item. For the most part, it is housekeeping, but we are also proposing to add two changes to the heads of terms. The first is an affordable housing review mechanism. We haven't secured 35% affordable housing. We have secured some, but if it's not implemented within a certain time frame, we will try and secure more. The second change, which is also a proposed verbal update, is that the parking permit wording is actually incorrect. It should also exclude blue badge holders. So that's a verbal update, and hopefully that will be picked up as a delegated change. There are 3 other verbal updates, and I am really sorry about the number of these. Condition number 13 should state 1 M43 unit is required. So that relates to building requirements for M42 and 10% being M43. At the moment it's currently poorly worded. Condition number 3 needs to be amended, and this relates to noise standards. It should refer to the 2014 standards, not 1999, and we need to remove reference to Table 4. Condition number 9 also needs to be amended to ensure that the louvers are installed on flats 22 and 29, and that's really to be precise and specific about where the impacts are. I can run through those units in the presentation, and if you have any questions, obviously, feel free to ask. I'll run through the presentation firstly. The application site is Legion House on the north of Uxbridge Road. It is within the designated centre. By way of history, the application site, when it was first built, was ground floor commercial uses with 3 floors of office space above, with parking provided to the rear. As shown on the plan on the screen, on the block plan, the parking would have served the whole development. In recent years, 2 of the 3 upper floors, which were former office floor space, have been converted to residential use. One was under a prior approval, which we had limited control over, and the other was a change of use application. This application therefore seeks to convert that last former office floor into residential. Now, the last use of that floor space was as a nursery and a church space. Now, both uses have relocated to other facilities on Uxbridge Road, and therefore the building is no longer in use and surplus to requirements. The principle of the change of use is therefore acceptable. Due to the piecemeal nature of the residential housing on this site, so we had an application for under 10 units, but this application is for 11. Therefore, this application has triggered the threshold for affordable housing requirement. We have therefore, following review of an independent financial viability appraisal, been able to secure 1 on-site affordable housing unit. In amenity terms, the ground floor of this building remains in commercial use, and therefore we have proposed enhanced sound insulation measures to protect future residents. And in addition, we've also proposed some louvers to prevent overlooking. This is the I'll go through the plan. This is the existing first floor, which is the floor that's proposed to be converted, the existing second floor that's already been converted to residential, and the existing third floor that again has already had its conversion to residential. These are the existing elevations. There are actually no elevational changes as a result of this application. These are the south and the west. And this is the ground floor and the commercial use and the car parking. There is car parking within an undercroft here and surface level parking, all of which will now provide 1-to-1 parking ratio for the residents of this development. There is an existing bin store in this location here, and there is a proposed bin store here, and that will serve all of the residential units. If we go up to the first floor, these are the proposed residential units. This section of the building at the top is above the Undercroft car parking. Now, it's a relationship between these units here and these units here, which relate to condition number 9 about requirements for louver screens to prevent the oblique overlooking between these residents. Now, the overlooking already exists on the 2nd and 3rd floor, but we weren't able to control those. They were prior approvals. Therefore, we'd prefer to get a better standard of accommodation in this proposed development, which is why the condition for louvers is proposed. On-site parking is provided, as I've mentioned, through the block plans. I'll take you through some photographs. This is a more detailed plan, which is in the plan pack of all of the residential units. One of the things that is highlighted is that some of the studios have subdivisions, dividing the bedrooms and the living areas. Studio units aren't supposed to have subdivisions, so there is also a condition that requires amended plans to be submitted. If I take you through some photographs, this is the existing site with the commercial at ground floor level. This is the rear of the building, so the access, and then you can see the car parking area under the Undercroft. The application is recommended for approval.
Okay, just one query. I note that in condition 5 we refer to 1 disabled car parking space. Is there any? But we've got no reference to electric vehicle car parking. Is that a requirement or not at this level?
Chair, if I may respond to that. With the scale of development, you've got 11 units. The problem we would have is obviously the electric vehicle spaces would effectively lose real space for your normally fuelled car. So on that scale, we have a tendency not to.
So on balance, you've decided not to?
On balance.
Okay. I'll open this one up. Councillor Oswald, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I was just looking at that parking allocation. I mean, there are more and more electric vehicles coming on stream. I think we're all aware of that. And I was just looking at some figures over the weekend about sales. Of petrol and diesel are well down, but electric car sales are rising all the time. Yeah, that's right. So, on balance, it may be correct not to have an electric vehicle space, but then again, on balance, it may be a good idea to have at least one. So I don't know. I'll leave that there for the moment. But other than that, I think this is probably a good application, Chairman, because this has obviously been empty for some time as far as office use goes anyway. So, you know, it's a good use, isn't it? It just gives us more scope, I think, for housing. I'll leave it there for now, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. I agree with my colleague over there. It's good to see this property being used for housing. A couple of questions. Firstly, parking. The impact on this proposal on the availability of parking for the commercial units at the ground floor. Are we taking anything away from them? And secondly, the affordable housing has been worked on a financial viability based on 5 flats that were built and are in occupation already, and 13 flats that aren't proposed. I would like to see a financial viability study on the 11 flats being proposed for this floor alone, because I find it hard to believe that it's not going to be financially viable to provide more affordable housing on a simple conversion. So I would like to see that. And with regards to the electric parking, we should be preparing for the future. We're seeing the standards raised, 20 active, 20% passive. It may be inappropriate to require 20% active at this time, but I believe we should therefore be asking for 40% passive, so that the conversion to electric is quite straightforward in the future.
Okay, we'll hold the electric point, if I might, because I think that's a straightforward debate. Can we just come back to this? You're obviously picking up page 25, I suspect. Could we just clarify exactly how this FVA has been done?
The FVA, sorry.
I was going to say, I, like my colleague, was a little surprised that it came out at 1 unit on a conversion. But dark arts of the FVA, I don't get totally. But it just seemed to me, you know, conversions I would have thought were easier than building, and we come out at 1. So I just wondered if we're absolutely sure we're right.
So the financial viability appraisal can only consider the residential units proposed under full planning permission. Under prior approval, we aren't able to secure any obligations, which is obviously a problem with the prior approval process and system, which is why we've got an Article 4 in the Borough to try and prevent any more coming forward. But we can't retrospectively go back and seek any more affordable housing. With regard to whether we can secure more than 1, this did go through an independent consultant, so the financial viability that was lodged was independently reviewed, and they confirmed that only 1 unit was viable, and that's what's been secured.
If I may just come back on that one, please, Chairman. I mean, the paragraph here says that the consultants assess the financial viability appraisal on the basis of the provision of 13 units. Well, we actually have 11 here as part of this application, and the 5 units approved under the 2015. So they've done a financial viability assessment on a completely different proposal. And what we have here is a straightforward proposal for 11 flats on that floor. And what we don't have is a financial viability assessment. And I will happily live with the outcome of whatever that assessment says, but it should be, I believe, not including a development that's already happened, that's not part of this application, and is occupied.
So I have to apologise. The scheme started off as 13 residential units. There was an extension proposed at 3rd floor level, which was completely unacceptable for overlooking reasons, and therefore that was removed from the application. So when the review was undertaken, it was on the basis that the applicants wanted 13 units. Those 2 units at the 3rd floor were then removed, and it was only considered viable at 13 units to provide 1 unit. They maintained that offer of 1 unit, even though we made them reduce the number of units proposed from 13 to 11. Sorry, that's very confusing.
No, it's not. I mean, I completely understand you, but what this report says here is the financial viability assessment included 5 flats, which are built back in 2015 and are occupied. And I think that is a complete and utter irrelevance, And I'm not surprised if that's costed more money, because that was additional building works. This is a straightforward conversion. And what we should have is a very clean financial viability assessment on the 13 or 11 flats.
Were those 5 units also a conversion?
5 units shouldn't be part of it,
Yeah,
which
but
they
were they
are.
also a conversion?
Conversion under full planning, not for approval. That's why they're included.
Okay.
Not part of this planning application.
James?
I'm going to answer the question slightly differently, albeit give the same answer in effect as Mandip. So I know as part of the consultant's brief, it was to consider what they should be considering before then doing all the number crunching. And the consultants that did this FVA have dealt with a lot of schemes that have had the complexities of prior approvals and other bits of housing going on. So I know the consultants considered the initial question of which unit should be considered before then doing the number crunching. And for that reason, I'm satisfied with the outcome that says that it's been fully appraised and we can only get a single unit out of it. On the separate earlier point that was raised regarding electric charging points, I would add I'd be quite comfortable if members wanted to add a charging point. And I think the cost of that would be so small that I don't think that needs to be...
I need to come back, because it's quite clear the planning application here for the 5 flats that they've included is a 3rd floor side extension. It is nothing to do with the alteration of existing flat or office accommodation. This is a 3rd floor side extension. And for that reason, it shouldn't form part of the viability assessment, because obviously that is going to provide a disproportionate cost.
Or put another, what I'm saying is if we were to follow that through, we'd be challenging our own consultants' findings rather than challenging the numbers and the submission of the applicants, if that makes sense. And that's the bit that slightly concerns me, that we'd actually be challenging our own independent consultants' methodology and findings.
Maybe you got it wrong.
Mr. Chairman, I tend to agree with Councillor Edwards' statements. I mean, are we in a position where we can get this financial assessment redone on this application? That's the question I'm asking. Or we actually can only stuck with the evidence we have?
So it's not the case that if members were saying they think the consultants missed something, then we could defer it and get the consultant to look at the point that's missed. But what I'm saying is I know the consultant has considered this issue, our own third-party one, the one that liaises and works in effect for local authority, and was satisfied with the methodology that's been used. And that's, I think, the problem with this one. So we'd be going back to our own consultants saying we think you've done it wrong.
I have no issue with going back to any consultants. If they've done it wrong, they've done it wrong.
But
The question for me is, why should previous expenditure that is not related to this development in any shape or form be considered as part of the financial viability assessment for this development? What precedent are we setting here? If you're allowing development within the Red Line site that took place in the past to be considered, then I think you're opening up a floodgate here.
The committee, all of you here are the decision makers and you want to make a sure decision, but before you can do that you need relevant information. So if there's anything lacking, I would say it should be deferred to get clarity on it.
The problem we have with FBAs, and my colleagues have scratched their heads for some time, is of course we get limited information because we are not privy to them. We have no idea of how they're done, and we get a statement that says either it tells us this or it tells us this. And I know a number of colleagues on all sides of me have on occasions challenged these, and I think we've come back to the same place on a number of occasions. The question is slightly more specific with this one. Is the methodology wrong? The head of planning is confident it is correct. So that might be a specific point, but let's...
If I can help the committee, so I'm slightly digging my heels in. I think if members wanted a much more comprehensive explanation of why this is only delivering one unit, that could be a valid reason to defer it. But I'd be more comfortable sort of helping committee with that. But the bit that's concerning me is I kind of feel what you're saying is that they've got it wrong with the third-party consultant. And
no. I'm saying that based on their assessment, including the 5 flats above, they might well have got it right. The question I'm saying is, why should a 2015 development be included in the financial viability assessment? The 2019 development is completely separate.
Yeah, we're arguing about whether they include the right information. Effectively, the issue we have is the difficulty is that none of us know the rules of this at all, because we never do. The key question, I think, if I've got it in my head, is forget the outcome for a minute, because the outcome flows from what you put in. It's one of those starts at the top and works its way down kind of equations. The question is the consultant technically right, under the rules of FVA, to have included that previous development? Now, we may disagree with him, but if he's technically correct under the rules, he's technically correct. And we may think the rules are wrong, but that's not for us to be able to change. The question, of course, is are we sure he's technically correct? I think I've got the right question.
Yeah, so
I'm getting a nod, so that's always good.
Slightly differently. So members can either say, this is the consultant, we're going to take it as read, they know what they're doing, or effectively you could say to me, well, I want a whole page of A4 explaining that paragraph. And if you want that, that's a valid reason to defer. I'm going to wrap this in a minute, because I think we are. Well, I'll take a view of members in a moment, but I sense a view of at least 3, and there's 3 sitting quiet. So therefore, I think I've got it. There does appear to be some doubt, because it is unusual. We normally get it based on the number of units that is before us. And we have to accept them. We don't understand them. We have to just accept what they say. We may not get how they get to where they are sometimes. Can I just clarify one more matter before I move this? I'm taking that members would want 20% electric vehicle charging points in this one, which is 2 spaces.
I noticed in the later one, we moved over to the more modern standard of 20 active and 20 passive.
Well,
the view was maybe not to have the active ones, in which case I believe you should have 40% passive.
Yeah. Chair, if I may, I think the Council makes a very valid and sensible point here with regards to the 40%, which is technically a compromise.
4 passive?
I think so.
4 passive.
We can move forward.
I can live with either, but 4 passive is fine. So we'll get it amended to that anyway. So I'm just doing my notes, because if this does come back, I don't want it. It's had a lot of tidying along the way, and I need to make sure we don't lose the tidying. There's at least 3 members I think would wish to have some clarification. I suspect 1 or 2 more are going to nod as I say this, so that gives me confidence in what I'm now going to do. I'm going to suggest, therefore, just on this specific point of page 25, that we get it absolutely checked that method of calculation is correct. Now, if we come back with a report from the head of planning setting out that is a valid methodology, like it or not, we are where we are. Is that? Would somebody move that as a suggestion?
I would be happy to move it, provided we have the absolute clarity of why past development that's already completed.
Well, I know the question, so I'll be looking for the clarity of the answer.
I'm quite happy to second, because I think it's a key principle, because this could reoccur.
Yeah.
I'm sure it will reoccur. I don't think.
And before we do defer, can I just ask for a couple of other issues that haven't yet been answered? One is the parking availability of the commercial units.
That was my
impact on that. Also, just a tidying of condition 10. I think the studio units we should add in and retain thereafter to the removing of the walls.
Yes. Permanently retained, or whatever the wording
whatever
is.
you use on that one. And that was it.
Commercial parking, please.
Yes, Chair, if I may again. Yes, the 13 spaces were actually technically allocated to church and nursery use, so there is effectively no loss to the commercial.
Fine. That's So I have got a proposer, I've got a seconder for a deferral. All those in favour of deferral, please show me. Thank you. That's that one. Right. That was the simple one of the night. Not going well. Morrison Supermarket, 41 to 67 High Street, Useley. Another substantive addendum on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Again, there is an addendum on this item, primarily drafting errors, but there is there one or two verbal updates? There are two verbal updates. There has been a request for a change to condition 17, which is the delivery and servicing hours. It's requested that the delivery and servicing starts at 6 a.m. and not 7 a.m. as stated in the condition. The other update is that condition 23, this condition we would request that it's deferred or delegated to the head of planning to pull together an enforceable condition, because at the moment it says 10 or 20 decibels and we need to know which one the noise officer wants to make sure that we can enforce should there be a problem. So apologies for that error, and we will take that back as long as you're happy to do so. I'll run through the presentation. The application site is the current Morrison site on High Street in Useley. The application, so the red line extends to the store itself, fronting onto the High Street, and then the car park, which is accessed via St Stephen's Road. The existing floor plans show that there is a semi-basement, as well as surface-level car parking, which all serves the existing Morrison store. There is also some ancillary office accommodation at first floor level. These are the existing elevations of the site. The application proposes 2 stories of basement floor space. So one of the basements will provide car parking for residents, and the other car park, I'm simplifying, will be for commercial or customer car parking for the store. At ground floor level, it's proposed to retain a retail store, which is shown at the front. There will be a loading bay in a very similar location. I've got some comparison plans later to where the loading bay for the store is at the moment, which is accessed via St Stephen's Road. The store itself will move forward onto the High Street. If you know the store at the moment, it's set quite far back from the High Street and doesn't have the best relationship. So the Urban Design Officer has worked quite hard in making sure that whatever is proposed in terms of a retail unit on the street frontage on the High Street is actually a better retail outlet for any future, well, for the future occupiers, which we understand to be Morrison's at the moment. There is a mezzanine level proposed, and that's to ensure that there is sufficient head height for the store, so they obviously have their own requirements, but the mezzanine will also accommodate sufficient head height for the service bay to the rear. The mezzanine has allowed, however, for the delivery of duplex residential units, which aren't all that common, so they are welcomed as a result of the application. Going up the building, we have the proposed first and second floor, which are residential flats, which are serviced via 3 cores. The first core is located here, the second here, and I do have a plan of the cores, and the third is in this corner. Above the mezzanine, so above the service yard, there is shared communal amenity space here, and there is also a children's play area located here. This area here is also an area of shared amenity, but is at what is the equivalent of first floor level. In order to access the children's play space, there has actually been a lift provided. Initially, there were only stairs down to the children's play space, but that was amended as a result of the application. So there is now disabled access down to the children's play space. The proposals go up 3rd, 4th, and 5th floor level. We have tried in as far as possible to ensure that there is minimum overlooking between the residential units here and the school buildings located to the north. There is also an area to the south of this site on the corner junction where there were initially concerns about separation distances, but the applicants have scaled the building in so that the separation distances accord with council policy. So there is a 15-metre separation distance between here and here. If I go on, 5th floor, 6th floor, and these are the elevational treatments of the building. The application has been amended during the course of the scheme, and that was to address design comments. Initially, the building materials were of a render finish. We've negotiated a better quality, so it's now a brick finish with a varied palette of materials. It's considered they are better quality. The presence on the shop retail unit on the High Street elevation is also deemed to be a better solution than there is at the moment. If we look at the proposed rear elevations, and these are the ones that will predominantly face onto the school site, this section just gives you an understanding of the increased height for the retail store, the basement levels, and then the residential above. This is a proposed site plan. This is quite a useful plan. I haven't used all of them from your plan pack because there were a lot, so I've tried to pick out what I felt were the most useful.